Now, Eddie Wu was this month the recipient of the New South Wales Local Hero Award and was invited to deliver the New South Wales Australia Day address last week in Sydney. An incredible young man. And I asked him to join us here in the studio. Eddie, lovely to have you. So that's what he looks like. But see, this is another issue because people look at him and they say, oh, another one of these people from China and they've come here and invaded the country. There's a stack of them. Tell us your background. You're a dinky-die Aussie.
I was born in Camperdown, Alan, and I moved very far away to North Rocks, which is right next to Parramatta. So pretty distant to some people, but quite local for me.
And you and your siblings all born here in Australia?
Correct, and you know, that's why you can hear this accent coming out of my mouth, and those videos that you pointed out online, the most frequent comment is, what is that language he's speaking? So it's quite confusing to people.
But nonetheless, in that Australia Day address, you said you had great difficulty growing up. You experienced day-to-day racism. You were harassed and isolated for not being Australian. And you said, growing up, what seemed to matter was that I didn't look Australian, or at least I didn't fit what my peers thought and Australian was supposed to look like. That's tough stuff, isn't it? But it's great that you're talking about it.
I feel like it's taken me 20 years to come to the point where something which was really quite hurtful and difficult to move through is actually something deeply formative for me. And I'm very grateful for having gone through that experience and being given the support to understand, well, this is not just a unique experience to me, but it's actually very common. The more people I speak to, the more it resonates with people how this story is repeated around the country.
Eddie, do you think it's changed in Australia 2018? The feedback I get is there's a lot of admiration in the community for Asians on the basis of working hard, excelling. I know at selective high schools in Western Sydney that I know reasonably well, the top achievers, you look at James Roos and all those schools, the top achievers come from an Asian background. The parents get the kids into tutoring, they enthuse them, they push them hard.
Committed to learning.
And then work hard. I mean, I think the Australian way is to welcome new arrivals. Asians have been here a long, long while, but in large numbers, there's recognition of the hard work, the success story. And if Australians have a problem with any new arrivals, it's people who bludge on the system, and no one says that about the Asians. Do you think it's changed a bit?
I think it's both changed and stayed the same. I think you point out exactly right that, you know, Asian migrants have been here for a very long time. I met a family and they came here, it was about a good 80 years ago. So multiple generations they've been here and in fact have long forgotten many of the traditions that would have been associated with their homeland.
But you said a beautiful thing in that speech. You said, and I think we should say it 100 times, you said your parents didn't want you to just live here. They wanted you to belong here.
And that was a very deliberate choice. In fact, you know, going on Saturday mornings to Chinese school, which my brother and sister, who are older than me, did, they decided not to send me, partly because they knew it was a very hard experience of a Saturday morning, but also because they made a very calculated choice there. I miss the fact that I cannot speak the language that my parents spoke. But they were very deliberate about saying, well, this is where we want to invest.
Yeah.
We want you to be able to have a command of the language that we never
No more Australian than North Rocks. I coached the Barbarians, as everybody knows, earlier this year against the Wallabies. And we got in the bus. Our first match was at Lismore. And everyone just piled in the bus and you sat where you can. I got next to the three from the front on the left-hand side. And this great big man whom I knew played for Australia, Wycliffe Palu. Big black man. Magnificent back row forward sat next to me. We started talking about everything, and it's exactly what you said. I said to Wycliffe, well, where were you born? He looked at me and said, I was born in Manly Hospital. You know, that's what people can't comprehend, isn't it? And I thought, how long did it take you to feel comfortable that you were indeed a genuine Aussie?
Decades. So, I mean, as you pointed out, I'm 32, and I think it would have been past my teenage years, even into my 20s, when I started to realise, okay, well, here am I training to become a teacher and realising that actually I have something to give to Australian society and culture, and not just I'm here as a passenger. It really took me that long to realise, okay, as a professional, I have something of value to.
But it's an interesting journey you've had, isn't it? Because your brother entered the IT industry, and then your sister became a dentist.
Wildly successful.
I think you said that's right. The first doctor in the entire Wu dynasty. And then you were initially more interested in English and language and history, but you were convinced that there was a greater need in the field of mathematics.
Well, I went to the University of Sydney and I was there standing in the line to enrol. And it was at that moment, having done a reasonable amount of mathematics at school, that one of the professors suggested, look, here is where not just a need, it's a crying need, and it hasn't changed. 15 years later out of university, if anything, it's more severe.
Yes.
And I thought, look, the thing that excited me about becoming a teacher was the opportunity, as you've pointed out on the show earlier this evening, to have a positive influence on the next generation, on the leaders of tomorrow.
But I love what you said. I mean, I can understand why you loved English language. He said in the speech, Eddie, you're a star. He said, poetry is the art of calling the same thing by different names, but mathematics is the art of calling different things by the same name. Just amplify that.
Okay, look, so I'll give you the simplest illustration that I enjoy, which is that out on the touch football field, I used to be a touch football coach, and we'd, it's fifth and last, right? We've got a chance, we'll kick the ball, off it goes. What path does that ball trace out every single time as it sails through the air? And the answer is, mathematicians call that a parabola, that familiar sort of arc shape. But that's not the only object that makes a parabola. If you take a comet that's flying around the sun, the path that it traces out, exactly the same. And I could go on and on and on. I could look at logos, I could look at bridges, I could look at the path of water out of a fountain. Mathematicians look at very different things and we understand there's a unity underneath them.
You are unbelievable. You said, this Australia Day, I invite you to become a mathematician. Isn't this young man impressive? He said, when you look at people who seem so different throughout our country, who look different, who sound different and believe different things, you can be a mathematician by looking at different people and calling them all by the same name, Australians. Beautiful. Eddie, God, there must be people thrilled to be taught by you.
Well, this is the thing that I wish I had discovered when I was at school. Mathematics was taught to me as a series of steps that you go through to solve problems and out pops a number. And it took me until university when I realised that actually mathematics, much like English or history, is just a lens through which you see and perceive the world and you can understand it in a richer way.
Well, now, come on, here we go. Tell us, everyone, about WooTube.
5 years ago, I had a student, he was very sick. And I knew he would be at hospital, getting treatment, radiotherapy and chemotherapy. We're going to keep him away from school for weeks at a time. And mathematics, along with the many other subjects, but mathematics in particular, is a very coherent subject. I don't know if many people have this experience. Everything was fine until a certain point, and then if there's a key piece missing, everything after that, it's just... It's Greek to me.
Yep.
Sometimes it's literally Greek.
Yeah.
And so, I knew that this student was going to have immense trouble getting back on the horse if he was going to miss all of those crucial lessons. And I figured, look, we have technology that enables us to do something about this. And so I began to film my regular classroom lessons just with the phone in my pocket. It's just very simple technology. And I put it on the internet just to make it accessible to him. And I was surprised as much as anyone else that more than just this one student took interest.
So you stream all your lessons and now you've got 181,000 subscribers and your videos have been viewed by more than 1 million times. Tell our parents then how they can access WooTube.
Well, actually, this is one of the things which I feel most strongly about, which I would love to take credit for having planned, but have now very happily come into this by coincidence. Parents are one of the biggest audiences, actually, of the videos. And I can see there's amazing analytics behind which tells you the age demographics of who's viewing. And I know I have children, they're 4, 7 and 9, and I definitely understand that feeling of fear and inability to help your child when they come home with homework and you think, I'm sorry, I cannot help you with this.
Yes.
And so whether it's Year 9 trigonometry or Year 12 calculus, anyone who goes onto YouTube and searches for WooTube or for my name, Eddie Woo, it's the first one that comes up, and I've put a bit of time and effort into arranging them into playlists.
Well, congratulations on your achievement, Eddie. A lot of people say, oh, I did maths at school and it was no use to me later in life. I always say to my children, maths is a great discipline for getting your thoughts in order, for learning logic and reason. Because of the point you made, it's like the links in a chain. You need to be able to progress your thoughts through in a logical fashion, which I think in this world at the moment is particularly useful. But for Australia, where's it gone wrong for us in terms of our dropping level on the international league table in maths and science. We've fallen behind Kazakhstan. That's embarrassing. Where's it on a national scale? What's been the difficulty?
There's a couple of different factors that need to be weighed in there. The first one is that these international benchmarks are really tricky to interpret. I mean, as an example, if you look at systems across the OECD and you think about, well, let's look for some correlation between systems that do well and you know, their social circumstances, the way their education system is structured. It's actually immensely challenging to find out, to glean useful information out of there. As an example, in mathematics, there's been a long-raging argument about, is the best way to arrange students in what we call ability streaming? Do we separate out the brightest kids?
Yes.
Do we take the people who need more remediation? Do we separate them out and rank them? Or do we have what's called mixed attainment or mixed ability all the way through? You know, let's make sure little Johnny, who's really struggled along, is right next to Lily, who's been
Very good.
gifted.
I believe in that.
There's been a lot of argument about that.
Where do you stay? I'm in the former camp. I like the streaming.
Now,
that one's called vertical integration, where they can
Correct.
take the best and go down the top 20, first class, next 20, next class, bottom 20 all together. I don't agree with that. I think a horizontal streaming, where you have some of the best, some of the not so best, some of the mediocre, some of the bottom, and they can learn from one another. See, what I loved about this, you talked about the divisive issues everywhere, and you talked about the Trump presidency, Brexit, and local political issues, but then you said this, and Mark and I have talked about this thousands of times, we still haven't learnt to listen to those around us and appreciate points of view different from our own. You say this cycle can be broken, and if it is, education will be at the heart of how it happens. I mean, that's why people, I always say, have got two ears and one mouth. You've got to listen more than you speak.
absolutely.
But we're not good at listening to the other person. I had a mate, Jim Killen, a politician, who once said to me, Alan, always remember, not all the good players are in the one team. This is why you listen to another point of view, don't you? And you're a committed Christian.
I am. So that's an important part of what I bring to, I mean, the reason I serve, the reason I think it's important to use the gifts that I have to be able to bring that value to a community is part of all of that. And I mean, teachers are people who are self-sacrificial. Every teacher that I know puts in their time and effort. People often say in education, it's the only profession where it's not that you steal from work to bring it home, you steal from home to bring to work and to serve the children that are there. And that value of self-sacrifice is definitely deeply ingrained because of that faith.
What a beautiful human being. You're an absolute star. It's lovely to talk to you, Eddie.
Alan, it's a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. We'll talk again. We must hear from you again.